Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to another video to our more recent, newer series, being the Intermediate Player Guide series, where we've done a lot of videos in a new player guide, a new beginner series, and now we're stepping it up into the Intermediate Player Guide series. Last time we had an Intermediate Player Guide series video, we talked about who has radar. And I thought it's probably wise for me to follow up with who has hydroacoustic search. Especially if you're a newer player, there can be a lot of different things that can be challenging maybe to understand, things that don't immediately stick out like they would for players who have been more invested in the game. And there are still players who have played the game for many years that still don't understand which ships have hydro, let alone which ships have radar, the range, all those type of things. So as you progress as a player, going up an understanding of your knowledge will really help you a lot, and it will really impact a lot of decisions you'll make, particularly with destroyers, I would say, in this instance. Because hydroacoustic search can be rather cruel to destroyers, whether you're a destroyer player who's trying to get torpedoes off on an enemy battleship, cruiser, or possibly another enemy destroyer. But also, if you're in a destroyer and a ship is being aggressive with their hydro and pushing you, that could spell disaster for you rather quickly. So we're going to go over hydroacoustic search data. I'm going to generalize as best as I can about what ships typically have the hydroacoustic search. Typically this has followed nations rather well, and also certain tiers where you'll find it. So let's just go ahead and dive in here. When I was doing the surveillance radar data, I could switch the tier, ship, nations, and that around, but I don't have that option here, so you're gonna have to bear with me as I point some things out here, because they kind of have this all mixed together, as it were, so it's not so clear-cut to follow, but they do start out, at least when we're looking at the top here, starting off with battleships, then we go into cruisers, and then we go into destroyers. And there's two types of hydroacoustic search in the game. You have your standard hydroacoustic search. Typically, this has a longer range detection of, let's say, torpedoes, particularly ships. Okay, and then you also have what's known as the short range hydroacoustic search. These tend to not have a long range in detecting ships, but they can have a longer duration time. As you can see here, not too many ships get this, but there's a tier spread we'll acknowledge here in a minute. But you can extend this with different upgrades in the game, so on and so forth. So, hydroacoustic search, okay? So let's just talk about a little bit more of the mechanics, and then let's start talking about more of what ships and classes nations tend to have hydroacoustic search, okay? So when we're looking through here, the standard is hydroacoustic search will last typically at least 100 seconds. Here on the tier 5 German destroyer, the T-22, lasts 70 seconds. Standard is 100 seconds or more, okay? The next thing is you have to understand the torpedo detection range. This skill is typically used as a defensive skill. So when there are enemy ships have fired torpedoes at you, which in this current day and age in World of Warships, it can be a carrier, battleship, cruiser, destroyer, submarine. We only know what's going to happen next, super ships. But typically it's defensive to help give you as best knowledge as possible of how to avoid taking the torpedo damage, okay? So the bare minimum you start with your torpedo detection range is 3 kilometers, and then that will go up, okay? I take that back. It also starts at 2.5 on the Haida down here. But again, generally speaking, it's going to start off at 3 kilometers or higher. So if you're a cruiser, as an example, you can have a pretty good reaction time with your rudder shift. But let's say you're a battleship, your rudder shift isn't so great. So let's say something like the Preußen German battleship. Gross occur first, you're going to have a harder time to maneuver to avoid torpedoes, but you might mitigate. Instead of taking 4, 5, 6, maybe you only take 1 or 2, okay? So that's the understanding with the torpedo detection range. The other flip side of the coin is the detection of ship range, okay? So we start off here, it's probably, I think, 3 kilometers and up. Yeah, so the short range hydroacoustic search, 3 kilometers up. And then when we're looking at the standard hydroacoustic search, it looks like it starts off at 4 kilometers and up, okay? And this can help you in many ways, particularly when you have destroyers and cruisers and smoke screens, or even let's say it's the Italian battleships with the smoke screen and they're trying to push in on you, get really close. Then you can just light them and see where they're at, okay? The detection with having hydroacoustic search really prevents some players from making certain maneuvers on you, as an example. So let's, I can give you a situation here, okay? So the Pan-European Swedish destroyers, the Groningen and the Friesland, okay? They do have a 5 kilometer hydroacoustic range. So they can be rather trolly, or sorry, I should say Dutch and ships of Europe. They can be rather trolly in the sense that they have a 5 kilometer hydroacoustic range. They can detect destroyers away. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm a destroyer, I'm going to rush the Groningen of the Friesland, and they're sitting there and their smoke screen, you're 5.5 kilometers away from them, they have a hydroacoustic search going, and then you get within this range, yeah, with their quick reload time, they're going to melt you down pretty quick, okay? That's a pretty bad move. Now, on the flip side, the Groningen and Friesland, they don't have torpedoes, okay? So this is something I have done multiple times in the Minotaur. So trying to find British. So let's say a British cruiser, the Minotaur, has I think it's a 5 kilometer detection range with her hydroacoustic search. Okay. Because I know the Friesland and the Groningen don't have torpedoes, I have bullied these 2 ships. I have one time I ran up on a Friesland in a smoke screen, and I just popped my hydroacoustic search, but I wasn't within 5 kilometers. I typed in alt chat, I said Friesland, run. And then as I lit him, he popped his hydroacoustic search and wet his pants and died rather quickly. Okay. So that is, if you know that, hey, there's a Minotaur in the area, I probably shouldn't be sitting in my long duration smoke screen, and he might light me up with a hydroacoustic search or even have radar, that can be very bad for you, okay? Particularly I see this with destroyers and, let's say, German battleships, okay? German battleships are pretty notorious for having the hydroacoustic search on them, okay? Pretty much tier 6 and up, German battleships are going to have hydroacoustic search. I've seen destroyer players who sit in a smoke screen, they're pecking away at a grosse Kurfürst in my Benson, and I'm just like, yeah, haha, I can't do anything about it. And then the grosse Kurfürst with his 6 kilometer hydroacoustic search simply brings me in range, and now the secondary starts shooting me up, or heaven forbid, it's a Schlieffen, even though the Schlieffen has slightly nerfed hydroacoustic range of 5.5 instead of 6, okay? So when you know these things, it begins to take you from being just simply a beginner player to what I would call you as being an intermediate player. When you understand how these things can impact you, I've seen a lot of players get frustrated, like, I've the Polio Emilio, that it's a tier 10 Italian destroyer, with the YOLO Emilio, if you've been around in World of Warships long enough. And I saw a player complaining on the enemy team because like 6 of the 12 enemy ships had hydroacoustic search, and he tried a yellow at the start of a battle, and I mean, our team just lit him with hydro, and we killed him before he could actually get any torps off, even though he launched some, but none of them landed. And he was complaining in chat and being a bit of a sore loser about it. But that is just one of the things about the game, and maybe you want to wait till more of those hydroacoustic search ships are destroyed before you try a YOLO Emilio tactic, okay? Okay, let's keep that in mind, okay? Then you have a cooldown. When we're looking through here, it looks like across the board, it's a 2-minute reset time on your hydroacoustic search. Unless you probably take some skills to consumable cooldown time. I don't know if there's one that, yeah, you can take a combat signal that reduces, I think, that quickens the reload time of your consumables. Maybe it takes 5 seconds off or something. I don't know off the top of my head. And you typically get 2 or 3 charges, and you can even buff that up to 4 charges, okay? So that's that. So take a drink of water here. Okay, so let's talk about the ship tier and the nations, okay? Typically, you gotta bear with me here, you will find Hydroacoustic Search more normal at tier 6 and higher, okay? So we're just gonna start with that. Tier 6 and higher is usually when you stumble across Hydroacoustic Search more. Okay, there are some exceptions. You can see we have some cruisers here of these, a lot of nations listed here, and they have an exception, except the Yubari and the Ditto, that tier 4 and 5 of these cruisers. So that's a lot of nations there, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 of these nations of cruisers, tier 4 through tier 7, have Hydroacoustic Search that can detect torpedoes 3 kilometers away and detect ships 4 kilometers away, okay? With a duration of 100 seconds. Okay, that's a lot to remember. We'll get back to that here in a minute, okay? So typically it's tier 6 or higher. I saw some other exceptions. Yeah, German cruisers, they're gonna start at tier 4. Then I was talking about the T-22 German destroyer starts off at tier 5. Yeah, so typically there's a few exceptions. You have to have a few at tier 4. I say a few at tier 4. You have kind of good number among these nations. Some at tier 5, and then tier 6 is when you begin to find more Hydroacoustic Search, right? With surveillance radar, right? It's tier 7 and up. That's when you start running into radar. So when you begin to get these mid tiers to higher tiers, the game begins to change a little bit more. There's more things you have to be mindful of, more things you have to take into account depending on your positioning, your attacks, torpedo launches, so on and so forth, okay? So let's just have an overview of the battleships here, okay? So when we're looking at battleships, there's going to be one other exception at the bottom of the list, the short-range Hydroacoustic Search. Typically, if you see a German battleship in the game, it's pretty much going to have Hydroacoustic Search. If I'm not mistaken, I think the new Mecklenburg does not have Hydroacoustic Search. So I can actually check on my phone here since we're doing this video. I think the Mecklenburg gets defensive AA, but not the Hydroacoustic Search. No, it does not get Hydroacoustic Search, okay? Yeah, it's the defensive AA is what you get. So not normal to have on a German tier 10 battleship, okay? So you can use that to your advantage, right? So typically, if you see a German battleship, know it's going to have at least a bare minimum of a 5-kilometer detection range of ships. And then the detection range of torpedoes really isn't that big of a deal. To me, what I've tried to focus on is the detection range of ships, okay? That is more important because it can be a lot of numbers to try to remember if you're just like, oh, he's going to have this much more reaction time if his Hydroacoustic Search is on, okay? But if you know that, hey, this ship has hydro, and if I throw torpedoes, he might act like this, sometimes you can use that to your advantage and knocking out the enemy ship. Some players get frustrated. He just seems like he just magically knew that I was throwing torpedoes at him, and he ducked them all. Well, it could be he had Hydroacoustic Search, or he could be what I would refer more to as a pro Unicum, super Unicum player who just had this feeling, who knows that there's an enemy destroyer cruiser around, probably ducking torpedoes at him. There's several things that can kind of give them evidence to why, and then they avoid your torps, okay? Just several things. That's later down the road. But a German battleship, tier 6 or higher, is going to have Hydroacoustic Search, okay? The other exceptions here, there's 2 exceptions, is the Duke of York. It's a premium battleship, tier 7 battleship. It's got a 3-kilometer detection range of torpedoes, 4-kilometer detection range of ships, okay? That's a little bit trade-off there. Plays just like the King George V, but there's a few minor differences, one of which is the Hydroacoustic Search. The other battleship that has Hydroacoustic Search is the tier 10 for steel. I believe it is the incomparable. It has the short range hydroacoustic search duration, 180 seconds, lasts longer. Detection of ships and torpedoes is 3 kilometers, okay? So it's like, okay, German battleships, pretty much gonna have hydroacoustic search, 5 kilometer to 6 kilometer. And then there's 2 exceptions, the tier 7 British battleship, the Duke of York, with 4 kilometer, and then the incomparable with the short range hydroacoustic search, okay? So that helps you, okay? So then you already know pretty much what's going on with battleships, right? So it doesn't feel that big of a deal in that extent, okay? Then we look at the cruisers, okay? There are a lot of cruisers that have the hydroacoustic search. I mean, we're going all the way through these guys, okay? This is a lot to take into account, especially when you're looking at these 2 on the top here. You know, when we have, what do we count? 9 nations here for tier 4 through tier 7, and then tier 8 through tier 10. So you can actually see we lose 3 nations here as we ascend higher tier to a certain extent. Actually, that might be that's accurate, okay? And then there's some exceptions here. But we're like, okay, cruisers tier 4 through tier 7, 4 kilometer, 3 kilometer. Okay. Okay. So 4 kilometer for detection of ships. And it's gonna be American, Japanese, Russian, United Kingdom, France, Commonwealth, the Pan America, the Netherlands, and the Spain. But there's not actually many ships from Spain in the game right now at this point in time. So it's like, okay, so a lot of cruisers, tier 4, tier 7 have hydroacoustic search, okay? 9 nations. Then you go tier 8 through tier 10. We lose 3 different nations because we don't have a Spanish tier 8 or higher. Then I know we don't have the Commonwealth or the Pan American, okay? They just don't have those higher tiered cruisers in the game, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head, okay? That's off the top of my head. So it's like, okay, it's more the mainstays. It's American, Japanese, Russian, British, Dutch, and French cruisers, okay? But then they get a buff to their hydroacoustic search range. So the higher tier, the tier 8 through tier 10, 5 kilometer instead of the 4 kilometer detection range of ships. If you want to think of it in a similar vibe to the surveillance radar, the surveillance radar gets a buff when it hits tier 8 through tier 10, okay? So that's something that you can use, like, okay, the surveillance radar pretty much gets a buff once it hits tier 8. The hydroacoustic search pretty much gets a buff across cruisers at tier 8 and up as well, okay? When it comes to the specific ships, this is a lot of different ships. So, you know, talking about Buffalo, talking about Des Moines, the Worcester, the Cleveland, coming over here to I had to ship this off the top of my head. The Talon, the Riga, right? Coming over to here, Benator, Edinburgh, Goliath, and then the French cruisers. Okay, so it's like, okay, yeah, that becomes a lot, especially when you have ship lines that have like the American cruiser line and the British cruiser line. They have 2 lines of cruisers, so that's even more to take into account, right? But then you have certain ships like, okay, they don't have the hydroacoustic search. So that's a lot. And then we come down here and we can see they have some specific cruisers listed, like the premium, the Belfast 43, tier 8, 5 kilometer. German cruisers, again, if you see a German ship, you can pretty much, not 100%, okay? But let's say 90, 85% of the time, you can pretty much assume it has hydroacoustic search. That's just something in the game of World of Warships. If it's German, it's likely to have hydroacoustic search. So you see that here for tier 4 through tier 7 German cruisers, and the 5.5 kilometer, okay, a bit more than what these guys had. Then you see tier 8 through tier 10, 6 kilometer, okay. So the Germans are all about the hydroacoustic search, but not about surveillance radar, okay? Then you come down to the premium, the Agir, Someone's probably going to yell at me in chat or in the comments for pronouncing it wrong. 4.6. Okay, they're just highlighting it's different. It's a premium ship. Then we come down here into the Italian, right? We didn't see any Italian ships in here. Just a few of them have hydroacoustic search, being the Duca d'Aosta, the Abruzzi, Gorizia. Okay, okay, not so bad. Those are just tier 6, tier 7, tier 7. And then we come over here to the, was this the Pan-Asian cruisers? This is a premium. I think this one's also a premium. I don't remember. Tier 6, tier 8. So if it's a Pan-Asian cruiser, besides these two, it's not going to have the hydroacoustic search, okay? And then we come into destroyers, okay? Again, you can see a theme going on here. German destroyers pretty much are going to carry the hydroacoustic search, with several exceptions among the German destroyer line. So we see first here, destroyers, tier 6, tier 7, 4-kilometer range, except the Karl von Schönberg and the Z31. This is my most challenging, learning which German destroyers have the hydroacoustic search and which don't, okay? That is a challenge because you can see like a lot of these ships, there's Z something, Z52, I haven't played up the German destroyer line yet. It's still pending. But it's like, oh yeah, tier 10, 6-kilometer. The heavier, well, I don't actually know how they determine. They have a new German destroyer line. And they don't have the hydroacoustic search, if I am not mistaken. Z44, ZF6, the Schultz. Yeah, I could be wrong actually on that. I can't remember that line too well. But again, you can see what exceptions they have and which ships are carrying the hydroacoustic search. Then you have the Pan-Asian destroyers. There's only 2 of them. The Lo Yang is pretty trolly at tier 8 with the 5.5 kilometer hydro. And then the, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that ship, also has the 5.5 kilometer hydro. Lo Yang was a pretty popular ship back in the day. You don't see it as much, and you don't see this ship as much either. I'm wondering if it's kind of a copy and paste of the Lo Yang. Then you have actually a Japanese destroyer. This is a new one for me. Tier 8. This is the only German destroyer I'm aware of that has hydroacoustic search. The Harakaze 2. Okay, 5 kilometer. I don't see this ship very often. Yeah, the Groningen Friesland, 5 kilometer. Then you have the Vampire 2. I can't remember how the ship is available, if it's for Steel or Research Bureau points, and I feel like it's Research Bureau points, but I could be mistaken. It has it, and then the Forrest Sherman. It's one of the newest tier 10 American destroyer in the game right now at the moment with a 5 kilometer. So actually, the Forrest Sherman, it works in my mind. I keep in mind with the Groningen and the Friesland. Same duration, same action time, same cooldown, same number of charges. I have the Groningen, and I'm about to get the Forrest Sherman shortly once my coupon refreshes. Okay, but that's also another exception because this is the only American destroyer that has hydroacoustic search. So you can see kind of quickly once you begin to wrap these ships up in their nations. Okay, German basically going to have hydro. American battleships or destroyers, really not likely. No American battleship has hydroacoustic search. It's not common among the American destroyers except for Sherman. And then you have the Japanese ships, right? Some more of the nations that are more played in the game, so to speak. Then we come down here. Where is that at? Destroyers. Yeah, okay, this is what I'm thinking. The British destroyer line, tier 6 through tier 10, has the short-range hydroacoustic search. So if you see, you're thinking of, let's see, I'm trying to think here, the Jervis, the Jutland, the Daring, I'm trying to remember the name of the tier 6 one right now off the top of my head, but I can't remember it. They all have the short-range hydroacoustic search. The only exception among the British destroyers is the Gallant, and that's a tier 6 destroyer off the top of my head, if I'm not mistaken. You have another Commonwealth, the Haida, has a 3.5, so a little bit higher than normal, but because they buffed it 3.5, it's 2.5 on detection range of torpedoes. And then the London, it's a premium cruiser, has a short range as well, okay? So British ships can be somewhat more likely to have the hydroacoustic search. You have a few among the British battleships. British destroyers typically going to have the hydroacoustic search, and cruisers are also typically typical to have the hydroacoustic search as well. So that is a lot to throw at you in this video. I'll put a link, just like this advanced radar video I did. I'll put that video at the end of this video for you to study, okay? This one I don't have bookmarked. I've gotten a pretty good feel as I've played the game for a while. But as you're going through here with you, I was like, oh, I forgot that one. Oh, I didn't know that one had the hydroacoustic search, right? And I can have it on tab and pulled up because the German destroyers have been bugging me the most. I question the German destroyers the most of which ones have hydroacoustic search and which ones don't, because I know there are exceptions, right? So if I can even write down a list several times, maybe repetition, to help remind myself of which of these destroyers do not have the hydroacoustic search. But like I said, 44 is just a terrible ship. So, with that being said, I think I'm going to cut the video there and bringing it to a close. So hopefully this helps you. Again, like I said in the beginning, when you know what ships have hydroacoustic search, it will definitely influence you as a destroyer player in terms of your positioning. You know, you don't want to sail with 7 kilometers away from a Große Kurfürst or Bismarck, Schlieffen, pop your smoke and just sit there thinking you're going to be free farming when he's just like, nope, I'm going to probably just go ahead and push you with my hydroacoustic search, okay? And you can counter that with certain destroyers, like the British destroyers, when you can single file conga line torpedo. That's hysterical. I've done that a few times, so that's a nice little counter to that. So, but study this. I hope this helps you. It will, if you learn this. I mean, you don't have to get all technical rocket science about this. It is a lot to take in at first, but just take your time. Maybe you just like, hey, this week I'm just going to try to focus on the battleships. I'm going to learn which battleships have hydroacoustic search. And then maybe next week you're like, hey, I'm going to spend some week or two learning the cruisers, and then spend a week on the destroyers, okay? Some of you might be like, bro, you're nuts. It's just a game. Play and enjoy the game. But when you understand certain concepts, different consumables within the game, like hydroacoustic search, it can actually make your experience more enjoyable in playing the game, I would argue. So if you liked today's video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you did not, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you are subscribed, thanks so much. I really appreciate it, and we'll catch you here next time. Take care.